Hello everyone and welcome to Word on the Street, Election Edition. So, for Word on the Street, we always come together and we talk about whatever current events that's happening in the workplace, with the workforce, and I give you my take on what's going on. Well, for the Election Edition, we're bringing in people who are currently in elected positions and folks who placed their hat in the ring to say that they want to take on those elected positions to explore how they plan to lead, right? All right, gang, joining us today is Lance Randall, who is the Executive Director of the Black Business Association of Oregon. He's joining us to talk about what the Black Business Association of Oregon is doing, but in addition to that, I think it's just a great opportunity for us to explore what elected officials, this is the election edition, right? What elected officials should be thinking about as it pertains to Black businesses. Right? There are many Black businesses in existence in the state of Oregon, in the city of Portland, in Multnomah County, and beyond. And Lance has a keen perspective on what the Black business experience is in Oregon, but also what is necessary to kind of create a flywheel effect so that there can be even more opportunity and prosperity within the Black business community specifically. So, thanks for joining us today, Lance. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Right on. So my first question is, tell folks a little bit about yourself. Like, what brought you to Portland, right? Where you from? What were you doing before you came to Portland? And then, why were you encouraged to come to Portland to run the Black Business Association of Oregon?
Good questions. I'm gonna try to answer all those questions in that order. Well, I'm originally from the state of Georgia. Macon, Georgia to be exact. It's about an hour south of Atlanta, in the middle of the state, where I was born and raised. And I graduated from Morgan State University, historically Black college in Baltimore with a degree in political science. And then came back to Macon to go to law school at Mercer University Law School, but didn't like law school. So
I can't imagine why.
Well, it's the first year is designed to test you. They play a lot of games to see if you have what it takes to be a lawyer, and I just didn't like playing the games. So I decided that I would withdraw from law school in good standing and pursue my political degree. So after I left law school, I worked for a U.S. congressman by the name of Sanford Bishop, who, by the way, is still in Congress. He's the senior representative from the state of Georgia, representing the 2nd District of Georgia. So I had a chance to work for him to be his Director of Constituent Services for 2 years. And then all of a sudden, a friend of mine offered me a position at the Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce to be the project manager for the Macon Economic Development Commission. When my role was to recruit businesses to Macon-Bibb County from around the world. And I was the first Black project manager to do that job. And it was very interesting because people would come to visit Bibb County to consider locating their businesses there. And the lead person was a young Black guy in his 20s who was responsible for finding real estate, getting tax incentives, all these different things to make it happen. So I was very successful in that. But leading up to doing that, I was sent back to school at the University of Oklahoma Economic Development Institute. And this is a prestigious school for economic development practitioners to attend. It's a 3-year program, so it's equivalent to a master's. And what's interesting, when I went to University of Oklahoma in 1999, out of 350 students, only 6 of us were Black.
In the program?
In the program.
In Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma. What's interesting, I made up in my mind that I was going to be the best student in the class. So when I graduated in 2000, I was selected as the top student in the class for leadership, and I was given the Robert Castle Leadership Award, which they give out 1 award a year to the top student in the class. So out of 350 students, only 6 were Black. I was able to bring home that award, which I'm very proud of, for my scholarship in economic development.
Nice.
So then from there, went back to the chamber. I was doing recruiting. Then I started doing business retention and expansion, which is taking care of the businesses you already have, making sure they grow and expand. So I became one of the top economic development practitioners in the Southeast and eventually around the country. doing my work and learning from the things I learned from the Economic Development Institute. So I worked for the Chamber, the Macon Economic Development Commission. So then in 2007, I was recruited to go to Seattle, Washington to work for the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development.
Okay.
So
what year was that?
That was 2007.
Okay.
Packed up my car, drove cross country all by myself, and it was interesting. Growing up in the deep South, and Georgia's 40% black, so you see black people everywhere. As I kept driving west, it got whiter and whiter and whiter. I was like, okay, now this is going to be interesting. So then I hit Seattle and got to work for the Office of Economic Development, doing everything from recruiting, retention, expansion work, workforce development, film and music, anything pertaining to economic development I did. So I was there with the city for 8 years. Had a great career with the city. Then I shifted gears to work for a nonprofit organization called Southeast Effective Development in the southeast part of the city, which is the most diverse part of the city and considered one of the most diverse zip codes in the country. So I worked for Southeast Effective Development doing economic development, but I also did some art and culture work as well. But I worked with populations from all over the world that lived in that area, a lot of Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalians, and helping them with their businesses. A lot of businesses, a lot of food-related businesses. So I worked with them to grow their businesses, marketing, helping with their marketing, things like that. So I was with that organization for about 5 years. Then I took this strange turn to go back toward my political background and tried to run for mayor of Seattle.
Okay, now.
So I ended up in the top 8, even though I didn't win. But it was a great experience.
And what year was that?
That was 2019. I was encouraged to run by the business community because they liked the way that I handled economic development and understood the dynamic between business and government. And it was very challenging there for businesses because the city council just did not understand the importance of businesses in Seattle. So I did a lot of work with businesses, and so they tapped me to run, but we didn't win, which was fine. So after that experience, I was going to head back to Georgia because my parents were approaching 80 years old, and I was going to go back to be closer to them. Then I got a message on LinkedIn from a guy named Drayshawn Vance.
I know Drayshawn.
Yeah, Drayshawn with Modus Recruiting. And he sent me a message asking if I'd be interested in taking a look at a position in Portland. And I said, sure, let's take a look at it. So he sent me the information about something called the Black Economic Prosperity Agenda, and a program or a movement in response to George Floyd to try to uplift black businesses in the state of Oregon. And they needed someone to come in and, fulfill the objectives of the BEEP is what we call it. Well, the first question I asked was, well, are there any organizations there already that's doing this type of work? And they said, not really. And I said, well, what about any prospective leaders that could do this? And they said, no, we want someone who has extensive experience in economic development, and we want someone that's black to do that. And he said, I happened to run across your profile and saw all the experience you had in economic development, which is kind of rare from a black perspective. So that's why we're reaching out. So that was in July of 2021, I think it was. And we went through the national search process and the interview process. So by Thanksgiving of that year, they offered me the position to come down to Portland from Seattle to start the organization. And at that time, we didn't have a name. And then they decided we called the Black Business Association of Oregon. And I came down February 2022. And
what inspired you to even take the job? I mean, you were considering going home to be with your aging family.
Yeah.
You had a prosperous career in Seattle. What about this job made you change your plans and say, I'm going south, but not that far south?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I thought it was intriguing that they want to set up an association to only focus on black-owned businesses. Because typically in economic development, you focus on all businesses.
Right.
But to narrow it down just to black businesses, not BIPOC.
Right.
But taking the B off of that and say, we want someone to focus on this segment of the population was intriguing. The other thing that was intriguing was the amount of money they had already raised for the movement, which is roughly around $650,000. So when you're starting an organization,
Yep.
especially a nonprofit organization, that's one of the biggest challenges is trying to make sure you have the money in place.
That's right.
They already had the money in place. So I said, okay, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say you have full autonomy to put together this organization the way you see fit to meet the objectives of the BIPA.
Social entrepreneur.
Yes.
Okay.
So I said, well, you know, that's great. And then they got the money right. You always got to have the money right.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so the money was right, and I said, okay, I'll do it. So I packed up, and we moved down in February, and I got to work. I had to do everything from getting the nonprofit designation of the organization put in place, which took some time. I had to find someone to design the perfect logo, the colors. I had to find.
Who'd you use, by the way?
There's a company that is called Good Brand.
Good brand. Okay.
And it's owned by a young black guy named Seth Stell that I met some years in Seattle. He was working for Microsoft, and he left Microsoft to start his own marketing consulting business.
All right.
And I've been friends with this young man for years, so I reached out to him to tell him what was going on. He was excited. He said, I want to be a part of that. As a matter of fact, they sent me different logos, and he just put me through that process. And the logo that we chose, he personally designed himself. And I'm saying, why didn't you just go ahead and give me this logo instead of me going through this process? But it's a beautiful logo that he designed. And then I had him design our website, which is a phenomenal website. Then we needed a CRM, a customer relationship management system. So I have a friend of mine by the name of Lance Randall that really taught me how to do business potential expansion work, because that's where I excel the most. And he developed this CRM called Executive Pulse.
Okay.
And it's a web-based system where you use it for economic development to find businesses and put them into the system to keep track of the businesses, to get vital information, the basic DNA of the business, you know, address, ownership, and stuff like that. But you can also communicate with the businesses, and you can communicate with agencies and the organizations that you're working with to help the businesses.
Right.
So you can keep track of the businesses, but also keep track of the things you're doing to help the businesses. So we brought that system in, and then I, you know, had to pull together a board. So I began to get some suggestions, and finally I pulled together a board. Yeah. Got the designation done, and that was in the first year, before the first year was done. So when I first started, I was working out of an office by myself with our fiscal sponsor, the National Association of Minority Contractors, NAMAC. Yeah. And Nate McCoy.
Nate McCoy.
Small little office on MOK. It was just me, putting all this stuff together by myself. So I guess after about 6 months, we decided to relocate to the Lloyd Center.
Okay.
And I got an office with a smaller office connected to it. And then I was able to hire the communications director that we have, and her name is Summer Martin.
Yeah, Summer. Yeah.
Then, after almost a year, we began to raise more money, and people began to invest more, because Summer, I like to say, she likes to get our business in the street. So people began
in the best possible
way.
Yes.
So she began to put out across all channels of her connections and networks that this organization is existing, and this is what we're going to be doing. And people began to express interest in the organization. And people began to contact us and say, we want to be a part of this, and they began to donate more money. So we took it over $1 million.
There it is, in a year.
In less than a year. Less than a year, over $1 million. So then I said, wow, I got to get some more help. So, but I needed more space. So I will want to, let me go back a little bit. Another thing that was intriguing about this opportunity was the Portland Business Alliance at the time, which is now called the Portland Metro Chamber, was very instrumental in raising the dollars to get this started. And that was interesting, that an organization which is majority white would reach out to their members and say, we need dollars for this movement, and they raise the money. So I have to give them a lot of credit for getting it going.
Absolutely.
And I met some key people. And one of the key people I met was Vanessa Sturgeon, TNT Development.
Yeah.
So she found out that we were looking for space, because I need to hire some more people. So she reached out to me and says, I have some space, why don't you take a look at it? And we looked at the space, and it was very nice downtown in the Fox Tower. And I said, but that's, I don't know if we can do this.
Right.
But we worked out a good deal for a nonprofit. She's very gracious and very bought into the concept of what we're trying to do. So she worked it out where we could move to the Fox Tower downtown. So we have 5 offices and access to conference rooms and other breakout rooms and all these different things available. So we moved there in August last year. And once we moved there, I said, now I can start building the team. So then I hired a young lady by the name of Kennedy Fleming.
Okay.
Very experienced executive assistant, came from Providence. Dynamite, she just blew away the interviews because I'd worked with Modus Recruiting to do the national search, and they found Kennedy. Brought her on board, so now I had Kennedy in summer. And then I needed to hire another person, so I went back to Modus. I said, I need a director of business retention and expansion. Did another search and found Marquita Arnillo.
Okay.
Who comes from the BFM fund. Well connected in the area of Black entrepreneurship. So from February 2022 when I arrived to July 2022 when we finally got our nonprofit designation to today, we have gone over $1 million. We have a nice office with 5 offices. We have a staff of 4. We have over 100 members who have joined, Black members who have joined. We've identified almost 700 Black businesses across the state that are registered with the Secretary of State's office. We are an economic development organization that focuses only on Black-owned businesses throughout the state of Oregon. And we use the best practices of economic development, which is business retention expansion, entrepreneurship development, workforce development, and Black business recruiting. We're the only economic development organization. That's how we identify. We're an economic development organization, the only one in the country that focuses only on Black-owned businesses statewide. The only other Black business association by name is the Rhode Island Black Business Association. The difference is they're BIPOC, and they don't really identify as an economic development organization. And they really don't do the best practices of economic development the way that we do. So I'm staking the claim that we're the only and the largest and the best that's doing this for our business.
The only, the largest, and the best.
That's right.
That's doing this work for Black people.
That's
and
right.
it lives and exists right here in the state of Oregon.
That's right.
So you're not originally from the Pacific Northwest.
No.
You really launched your career in the South. Not only were you born and raised in the South, but then you worked in the South as well, and you started to do economic development work in the South.
Right.
And so I want to ask, what's the difference? Like, as an economic development professional, now you're focused on the Black community here in the Pacific Northwest, but you come from a highly Black environment from Georgia.
Right.
What's the difference between business development opportunities in Oregon and in Portland in comparison to business development opportunities in Georgia?
Well, one of the main differences is the number of Black people in Georgia and the number of Black people here in Oregon.
Right on.
In Georgia, it's about 40% Black. In Oregon, it's only 1.8% Black.
Right.
So the numbers itself is a big difference in that you have way more businesses in Georgia than you have here, and that's because of the population.
Right.
The other thing, and I would use Atlanta for an example, is that because you don't have a large population, you don't get a chance to elect a lot of Black elected officials.
Right.
Atlanta hasn't had a white mayor since 1974 when Maynard Jackson was elected as the first Black mayor. And as Black elected officials, and then at that time he also had a Black city council president, a guy named Marvin Arrington. And there's a reason why that the airport is named after Maynard Jackson, because of the things that he did to bring about prosperity for Black businesses. So what I'm getting at is when you have a Black population that's significant size, and you have Black elected officials in place, and then you have a lot of Black businesses, those Black elected officials have a tendency to make sure they're doing things to make sure that the Black businesses are being successful.
Right.
Here, the population is not very large when it comes to Black, and you don't have a lot of Black elected officials, which means that you don't have a lot of that political leverage that's going to make sure we're looking out for those Black businesses. It's just a challenge. It's just a number game. So the second thing is that because you have so many Black businesses in the state of Georgia, and most of them are centered around the Atlanta area, they have their own ecosystem of economic development because they do a lot of business with one another.
With one another.
Because they know where they know where they are. From DeKalb County to Fulton County to Gwinnett County to Clayton County, businesses, black businesses are doing commerce with one another because they know where they are.
Yeah.
Here in Oregon, it's a challenge to find out where the black businesses are.
Yeah. This is sometimes in fact a challenge to find out where the black people are.
Yes.
Let alone the business.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And because there's a challenge, in looking at our research, most of the black-owned businesses are centered around the metropolitan area of Portland.
Right.
But you have businesses that are black-owned down in Salem, Eugene, Bend, Eastern Oregon.
Yeah.
But we don't ever talk about them. And you have black farmers in Oregon that is providing, meat and everything to butchers and what have you.
Right.
So, but there's not a comprehensive list that's in place to know where all these black businesses are. But in Georgia, they know where they are, and they have this network of connection where they're doing business. Here, it's not here yet because it's a small number and they're scattered out, so we don't know where all the businesses are, so we can do business with one another.
But you're creating a database.
Yes, we're creating a database to try to solve that problem, and we're also pushing legislation to try to deal with that problem as well.
What kind of legislation?
Well, when you want to do business in the state of Oregon, everyone has to register with the Secretary of State's office.
Every year.
Every year. But when you register, your business goes onto the Secretary of State's website. So you can go onto the website and do a search and see any business.
Yep.
And you can see the profile. You can get the name of the business, its classification as far as the corporate structure, the address. But you don't see an email address. You don't see a phone number. But more than anything, you don't see the ethnicity of the business owner.
Interesting.
And when I got here, I was trying to find different lists, and I did find lists, but there was a lot of overlap, and it seemed to be mostly focused on the metropolitan area. But I said, we got to find these businesses. So working with Representative Janelle Bynum, I talked to her about this situation, and I said, why don't we propose some legislation that would say any business that wants to register to operate in the state of Oregon, that we want to add an additional section where they can indicate their ethnicity. And then that way, organizations like mine could ask the Secretary of State's office if we can have a download of just the black-owned businesses that have registered with the state. And that way, it makes it easier for us to find these businesses, to put them into our database so that we can reach out to these businesses to help create this web of connection around the state of black businesses all over so they can know who's doing what. So we introduced it last year, but then the Democrats and Republicans got into a fight.
Yeah.
And our legislation died. But this year we reintroduced it, and we're taking a different approach. The BIPOC caucus is supporting it.
Wonderful.
And now we're in the process of getting letters and signatures on this document from other groups to support the passage of this legislation, and we think we got a good opportunity to do it. If we do this, this means that, and it'll be optional to start, but hopefully we can get a marketing campaign to let businesses know you should give this information. It's designed to help organizations like mine identify you, but it not only helps black businesses, Asian businesses, Mexican business, all type of businesses. I just think that it's a benefit for the state of Oregon to know the diversity makeup of the businesses.
Absolutely.
And the reason why is because this co-bid system, which is something that gets on my nerves.
Well, tell me why. Because it gets on my nerves too.
Well, it's a system that does nothing but identify businesses of color.
Right.
And that's it.
That's it. And then they send an email to you.
And they send an email.
That's it.
And then when you go through the process and you want to get government contracts, you still have to compete.
You do.
And because of how we've been deprived and mistreated and denied loans, and it has hindered our ability to be able to build the capacity, build the money, the number of employees that we need to have in order to qualify for some of these big contracts.
Right.
But at the same time, you have a lot more businesses who are not co-bid certified that, a lot of the private sector businesses would love to do work with. But when they start looking for black-owned businesses or Asian-owned businesses, they go to the co-bid list. When I went to the co-bid list to look at it, to do research on black-owned businesses, I found only 147 black-owned businesses that were on that list.
Well, number one, it's a process.
It's a
to
process.
Get certified, to be listed on that distro list. I mean, we did it, but it was an undertaking.
Yeah, it's an undertaking. So a lot of them don't go through it, but even if you do go through it, it's still, the opportunity is still no greater.
I haven't gotten a contract
Right.
as a result of it at all.
So I said, well, we have to do something different. Now here's something I want to point out. We don't push our businesses to go after government contracts. We're trying to build relationships in the private sector because private sector businesses want to diversify their vendor list.
Yep.
And if only thing they have to work with right now is the co-bid list, they're not being very successful. Because I told you, if you only have 147 black businesses to pick from. So what we want to be able to do is we can capture all the black businesses in the state, what they do, the sectors that they work in. Then we have a much better list than co-bid.
Yeah.
But we can take that list and make it, well, we won't really make it available. But we would say businesses or corporations who want to meet DEI goals or diversity goals, if you're looking for a black-owned business to do certain things, contact us because we want to be able to have the master list of all the black businesses across the state. Now here's the advantage. The advantage for black businesses to focus on the private sector rather than the public sector. When you go after public sector contracts, you have to go through an RFP process because these are tax dollars that are coming in and the government cannot play around with tax dollars. They have to make sure they maximize the tax dollars when they're trying to get things done through contracts. The private sector doesn't have to do an RFP.
Right.
Which means that they can just like you.
Yep.
And say, give me a quote.
Yep. They can just know you.
They can just know you
direct.
And you get an opportunity. So with co-bid, if it's about capacity, if it's about dollars, if it's about experience, if it's about employees, black businesses don't have the capacity for these big contracts. The only way that they can build that capacity is in the private sector.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do is build relationships with the broader community of businesses, corporations, to let them know that the return on investment of the return on your investment into our organization is that we're going to produce some of the best and brightest businesses that are going to help you with your bottom line. That is what you want.
Yep.
And they just so happen to be black-owned businesses. They like that. Bottom line, so that's what you...
Best talent out there.
Best talent.
Yep.
We're going to give you the best price, the best service, the best everything. Invest in us and we're going to do that. And then we're cultivating relationships where we want to be able to take our black-owned businesses, because we're going to do things to enhance their operations, to make sure everything is on point, so that when we do make those introductions, that they're presenting the numbers right, the marketing is impeccable, everything is great, so that the private sector businesses will say, give me a quote.
Yep.
And the more quotes you get, the more jobs you get, performance, you now are generating money, you're building capacity and experience. Now, when you go through the co-bid process and you get a chance to bid, now you can compete because you have the dollars, you have the employees, you have the capacity and the ability to do it. So I say, don't spin your wheels trying to go after these government contracts yet. We're going to get you ready to get those government contracts, and the private sector is going to help us do that.
And it definitely, I mean, so I own a small business. We grew workplace change through word of mouth in the for-profit sector.
Yeah.
Literally, nearly every single small business owner, mid-business owner, business owner is looking for great talent.
Yes.
I mean, we have had to let go of 2 CPAs. Why? Because they sucked.
Yep.
Right?
That's right.
And it was through word of mouth. We are looking for a great, and there are people in the room right now who are laughing because it was traumatizing how bad, our last CPA was. Because people will sell you on something that they actually can't deliver on. It's hard to find a contractor, a service provider, a goods provider who does great work.
Right.
At the end of the day, the great neutralizer is quality of work.
Quality of work.
Right? And so the fact that you're helping people scale up, because the quality is there, they start with where there are low barriers to entry, and then maybe they'll be able to compete in the co-bid process or in the RFP process for the government practices or government contracts is genius. But I'm gonna tell you something, that's the exact strategy that we use.
Yeah.
We have only won one RFP, government RFP process. Now, we have a lot of different government contracts, but if they're at a certain threshold, you don't have to go through a big formal RFP process. It can be, it's very truncated. You can do a kind of a direct contract. opportunity. But for the big ones, like the company shifting ones, like the trajectory changing ones,
Right.
man, not a one.
Well, let's talk about that, how we can make that happen.
Right on.
So remember I talked about Maynard Jackson and how the airport has his name on it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why. When Maynard got elected as mayor in Atlanta, first black mayor, this project was on deck to be done. So he inherited it because he just surprised everybody when he won the election. But he knew what he was doing. Very smart man. The first thing he did when it came to the Atlanta project of the airport, the Atlanta airport, he says, I want to meet with all the contractors who have been awarded, especially the ones who were the first on deck, which are engineers.
Yeah.
So he met with the engineers, all white engineers. He says, okay, we have a 25% participation mandate that we want to make sure you guys meet. So as you go about trying to find subcontractors to do this work, we need you to find people of color.
Yep.
Black people. So they go off into the sunset, and then a couple of months later they come back to meet with the mayor and they say, we cannot find any aerospace engineers that are black. So the mayor says, okay, I get it. So he's in his office one day, he decides, well, somebody give me the plans to that airport. I want to take a look at it. He laid the plans out and looked at them. He says, this is interesting. So he called for another meeting with those engineers and he came back and said, listen, I understand that you guys say that you cannot find any black aerospace engineers. And during that time, it's understandable because historically black colleges really didn't teach that because they weren't gonna let us fly planes or anything like that. So why teach it as a major?
And what year was this?
This was in the 70s.
70s, yeah.
So a lot of historically black colleges where we were mostly going was not teaching that. So it's understood. He says, I get it. He said, but when I look at an airport, I see a bunch of driveways. They're just long and wide.
Pavers.
And I know a lot of black people that can pave. He says, so I'll tell you what we're going to do. And this is key for government. He says, we're not going to move forward with this project until you fix this problem. He says, so weeds will grow up under this land before we expand this airport until you fix this problem. And he dismissed them. So then they came back some months later with a guy by the name of Herman Russell, who was a black contractor, and presented him to the mayor. They said, okay. But it wasn't just enough to present him. He says he got to be successful. So they all had to come together to make sure that this guy got the work, he had the capacity, had everything to need to be successful. And that one project catapulted Herman Russell's company to one of the top black-owned construction companies in the country, in the world. Because when it comes to elected officials, they like to talk about what they're trying to do to make changes, but sometimes it's not what you try to do, it's what you won't allow to happen.
Right.
And what Maynard Jackson was saying, I'm not going to allow all the white folks to make the money on this airport. He said, if everybody can't make money, nobody's going to make any money.
I love that.
And because of that, Atlanta has excelled when it comes to black businesses and contracting opportunities because he set forth a model where all the white companies who have been eating off the government for years.
Not snacking.
Eating.
Thanksgiving dinners every
eating
day.
Off the government. He basically said it's not going to happen anymore because you had unfair advantages because the government set you up to be able to, for this to happen. Now we're saying you're going to have to help fix the problem, which means that you won't make any money unless you fix this problem.
Yep.
And that's what's happened in Atlanta. That's why it's one of the largest mecca for black businesses because the government said we won't do this to allow you to continue this until you help change. And that's one of the differences here is that the government is trying to do a lot of different things, but they don't realize some things that you're trying to do or continue to do, it doesn't help us.
Right.
Which means that you got to now say what we won't do.
Right.
Unless something changes, which means that all these guys that's been getting all these contracts all these years and eating off the government, And we talk about DEI, the government cannot make DEI happen. But those who are benefiting from the government are the ones that have to make it happen, which means that if you have to put some money up, if you have to give them some of your employees, whatever you got to do as a private sector business, you're going to have to do it, because if everybody's not making the money, we can't let you make money. So that's what he set forth, that model, and it worked. But when you don't have enough black elected officials in place to push that narrative, it's a challenge, and that's the big challenge out here.
All right, Lance. I'm going off script. Put my script down.
Come on. It's okay. Let's talk.
I love what you're talking about with respect to kind of change management, right? The words following, decisions coming after the words are made that impact outcomes, right? It's not about just doing busy work. It's about actually paying attention to if the efforts that you're putting forward towards this thing that you're so passionate about actually materializes into some kind of change in outcome.
Right.
That's the question. So I think, I'm from Michigan. I've been here for 16 years.
Yes.
And I feel like the Pacific Northwest talks more about race than I'd ever experienced growing up in the Midwest, spending summers on farms in Kentucky, like literally being immersed in the Black American experience. I heard with Black people in critically dense Black environments, I've heard people talk more about race here in Oregon than I ever did in those particular environments. And there's some pretty significant wealth gaps here for Black folks, right? So it's not like the Black people in Oregon, although we're small, we're like all of us to thrive and everybody's winning. Like home ownership is lower up here in the Pacific Northwest in comparison to the South and to the Midwest. Economic advancement, prosperity, graduation rates, college graduation rates, all of the numbers are materially lower than it is in the South and in the Midwest and the East Coast. We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion so much here. So what do people need to, we're talking about leadership here. Where do leaders have to change from a narrative perspective to a behavioral perspective to actually get some of the outcomes to follow the narrative?
Well, the first thing we have to do is not try to put all people of color into one bucket and thinking that there's one solution to solve all their problems.
Right on.
I know a lot of people like this term BIPOC. I really don't care for it.
Me either. One day I was Black, the next day I was BIPOC. I don't know when it happened, but it was a thing.
Yeah, there's a problem with that, because everyone's experience is different. Okay? So we need to stop doing that and say we need to come up with strategies for each ethnic group based on their history and what they've done. I would say the Native Americans are second to what has happened to us, because at least they have casinos now. We still have not gotten a mule or 40 acres or nothing. So our situation is the worst situation when it comes to an ethnic group and how this country treated us and how they deprived us. But it was very specific things that were done to us. So if the things that were done to us were very specific, it takes very specific solutions to solve the problems. So the first thing that has to happen is, in any strategy or any proposal, there has to be a carve-out of how we're going to include Black people and how we're going to address Black people and get them involved in this process. What I see is a lot of times they put this thing together and they say BIPOC, like we're supposed to see ourselves in that. We don't.
No.
You have to put us in there, because you put us out of hotels, you put us out of restaurants. Now you got to put us back into the fabric of this community to make sure that we're getting the things that we need. That's the true meaning of equity. We don't have what we need, but we pay taxes. We work every day, we produce, but we still don't have what we need. So the elected officials just have to make sure that in every piece of legislation, everything they do, you're going to have to acknowledge the fact that we have to get what we need or set forth a framework to address some of our issues instead of talking about it. Because when you do more talking, then you're not doing anything but talking.
That's it.
That's it. So from a policy perspective, that's what has to happen. I give you a great example. Like The city is talking about this policy where they're saying, well, if companies move downtown, the business moves downtown, they get some type of tax incentive for moving there. The problem with that is they have a threshold. You have to have 15 employees.
Yeah.
What about those who don't have 15 employees?
We don't have 15
Which is
employees.
most of us, because most of the businesses are employment basis between 1 and 4. So where's that? When it comes to affordable housing, we talk about building affordable housing for who? And do we talk about the people in affordable housing?
Yeah.
Do we talk about how we're going to get them out of affordable housing?
That's right.
There's a lot of things to talk about. So we got to be more specific about goals, not just doing something just to do it.
Yeah.
We're doing something to start a process of solving a problem. We don't go through the process of problem solving. We just want to put a Band-Aid on it and see if it'll heal. But we don't even peel the Band-Aid back to see if it's healed. We just leave it there.
Right.
So
it was never supposed to be the Band-Aid was never supposed to be a permanent solution.
Right.
It was supposed to be a temporary situation followed by a permanent solution.
Exactly. So you're right. I mean, people talk a lot about, race and equity because it makes them feel good to talk about it.
Yeah.
But when you ask them, well, let's do something. See how fast they move.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was the state of Oregon, the Department of Administrative Services did a study, an assessment, and I feel like we do a lot of research into things where we already know that there's a problem there, right? There are certain things that we don't need to research. We have an opioid crisis. I don't know how many more research projects that we need to do in order to determine that it is a crisis. We know that it is a crisis. 600 deaths last year. We just talked to a deputy district attorney about the information, and yet we're still doing studies about it. So we will study something ad nauseum, right? But we don't tend to go beyond the study to actual shifts and changes. So the state of Oregon did a study about who's receiving the bulk, right? Who's receiving contracts from the state of Oregon. And they discovered, now they didn't know this before the study.
They discovered again.
They discovered again.
They'll discover it again the next time.
In the next 5 years, right? They discovered that MWESBs were significantly underrepresented with respect to receiving contracts from the state of Oregon in comparison to the volume of women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses that the state currently has. I mean, a fraction of the representation of minority-owned businesses were getting actual state grants. And it was specific. It was acute to women and minority-owned businesses. The response from the state of Oregon was something like, and we have it on social media as well, but like, we're taking steps to make sure all businesses have an opportunity to receive fair access to contracts in the state of Oregon. But all businesses are not disparately represented, right? Are not underrepresented in the output. So how are you gonna come up with a broad solution to an acute problem, right? I broke my arm. Well, let's go to general physical therapy and just think about how our body moves. No, I got a real specific, yes, we can talk about that. Yes, we can. After we fix the break that's happening right here in my arm. And so I wanna ask you, right? I say all this to ask the question of, where are the gaps in the state of Oregon? Where are the gaps in the city of Portland, Multnomah County, when it comes to supporting Black-owned business? The real gaps, where do you see them happening?
Well, I think that the government tries to cover everybody, and they try to come up with programs to try to cover everybody. And like I said earlier, you can try that all you want, but everybody's experience is different.
Right.
So you have to stop trying to say we're trying to make it fair for everybody. If you don't start, if you didn't start off being fair for everybody, you can't offer solutions that are fair to everybody.
Yeah.
You got to be very specific about how to solve these problems, and trying to paint it with a big brush.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. The other thing that has happened, and this is a lesson that I want a lot of people, my brothers and sisters in the community, to understand, is that coming from a civil rights family, we have to do a better job in telling people what we want.
Right.
we have a tendency to say, okay, here's a disparity study, all this stuff is going on, but we don't offer a solution of what we think needs to happen. We need to say, okay, this is how we want this fixed. We don't want you to fix it, we'll fix it, but give us the resources to fix it ourselves.
Yeah, very specific.
Very specific. Remember I told you earlier about the legislation? I'm asking myself, why hadn't anybody said, we got to find our black business? I wrote the legislation, gave it to Representative Bynum, a black female, and we're very close to getting it done. So what I'm saying, the gap is that we're gonna have to be more forceful in saying specifically what we want.
Yeah.
Because the study is gonna keep saying the same thing over and over again.
Over and over again.
And they're gonna keep producing that, and they're gonna give us the same nonsense. So we're gonna have to start sitting down. That's part of the reason why we're doing this strategic plan based on our dashboard. This is gonna be the
And what's the dashboard?
The dashboard is a tool that we're using to measure the success of black Oregonians, and we're doing a comparison between white and black Oregonians. So there's some gaps in education, some gaps in home ownership and what have you. And this dashboard is designed to move in real time every quarter so we can see our progress. See, a lot of times we do these reports and we come back and they're the same because we don't track them in between.
Oh, this is from your Eco Northwest partnership.
Exactly.
Yeah, I saw this online.
Right. So we have the starting point where we know where we are. And we're putting together a strategic plan that's designed to address all these different issues. Not only the community, but the businesses have to help.
Right.
And we want to be able to see our progress. Are we closing the gap? Are we coming up? And that's important for us to see and elected officials to see, because if you're pushing legislation and every quarter it's not moving, that means your legislation is not operating, which means that we have to begin to propose legislation. That's how we got the 64 and 65 civil rights legislation. Dr. King and those guys basically put it on the table.
Right.
This is what we want and got it done. We got to do more than that. We have to begin to go down to Salem. We have to begin to write our own legislation and push it for our benefit. We have to do that, because if not, they're going to continue to do these studies, and it's going to keep saying the same thing, and we want to know what's happening. No, we have to start making things happen, and that's what my organization is trying to do.
Yeah.
Is make things happen. We have the ability, we have the brain power. The numbers are small, but that's not a bad thing. You can be stronger. We have to create a network of relationships, community and businesses, and we have to sit down, not to argue, not to see who is the most influential, but we need to sit down and say, listen, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Let's figure out how we want to address this problem. We pay taxes like everybody else. We should get some of our tax dollars coming back to invest into our problem-solving efforts. And that's what has to happen. So the gap is that we have to make sure that the elected officials are not guessing anymore. No more guessing. We're going to tell you exactly what we need to have done, and here's some policy considerations for you to take a look at to push forward that will help us.
So do you have a lobbyist?
We're 501c6, and I got a political background.
Oh, so you're a lobbyist.
So I've been going down, but eventually we may look at one. But right now I've been going down to Salem, pushing this legislation. Eventually we will take a look at the COVID situation.
Nice.
Because that's going to take a coalition of all types of people. That will take a BIPOC coalition.
Right.
But in the meantime, we're trying to see what we can do with this and trying to get our footing as an organization to help pull out the best of our black businesses and our black community. And I think that in a state where it's not a lot of us, we somewhat gotten covered and hidden by the snow.
Yeah.
So we're going to start popping up these little beautiful black pearls on top of the snow in different areas in business and education. That's what we want to start doing, popping up out of the snow, sitting on top. And when I say sitting on top, we want to be the best. Because we have the ability. We have the ability. But it's kind of tough when you're in an area and you don't see a lot. Going to a black college is a great benefit for me. Growing up in the Deep South, seeing the excellence of black people, I know that it's not as prevalent out here as it is South. But that's okay. And that's part of where the black business recruiting I was talking about. We're trying to connect with viable black businesses and viable philanthropists that are black and what have you, to let them know that we're here.
Yeah.
We need some help. We want some black businesses to come out. We want black students to come out. We want black professionals to come out.
Yeah. Have you connected with Greater Portland Inc.?
I have. Me and Monique, we work very well together.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's the thing. We have a lot of black leaders in key positions. Monique with Greater Portland Inc., Robert Kelly over at University of Portland, Brian Williams over at Warner Pacific, Adrian Bennings over at PCC. As my understanding, the head of Motor Health is a black guy.
He is.
So
for sure.
So we have a good nucleus of high-level people. We just have to leverage them, and then we have to continue to cultivate the relationships mainly among ourselves. We got to like each other out here. And I know that we have got to like each other. We have got to realize there's not many of us out here.
Right.
And the closer we get, and it should be easier because there's not a lot of us.
Right.
There's no reason we shouldn't know each other and be able to make things happen for ourselves. And it can happen.
I agree it can happen, for sure. We got 2 questions left.
Okay.
My first question for you is, what is the biggest challenge that you see black business owners having right now?
Being able to build a business.
Interesting.
Yes.
How so? Why do you think that that's the single biggest top of the leaderboard problem?
Because everything pretty much everything that can be discovered has been discovered. So now people are figuring out how to improve something or to alter it to make it better. So let's talk about, let me give you a good example. It was discovered that Jack Daniels, the true inventor of that beverage, was a black person.
Whiskey.
But for years, whoever took the recipe, they have been able to capitalize on that for almost 100 years. Imagine what would have happened if the creator of that whiskey at that time was able to start capitalizing. So now you got intergenerational wealth. This was something that was invented. So what has happened to black people, we've invented a lot of things, but it was taken away from us or stolen away from us by others, and they've capitalized on it for years and years and years and years. They took it away. And a lot of things have been invented. We have not been involved in that inventing process. So now, a lot of things are already existing and invented. It's very tough to invent something new. That's completely different. So now people are saying, well, I can create a different version of this, a different version of that. So what I'm saying is, if we had been able to start businesses way back instead of dealing with all this crazy stuff, this deprivation, there's a possibility we would have a lot of black-owned businesses that have been around for 100 years old, creating wealth, and an invention that continues to go on. You know, Ford motor cars, they've been, what, 1800s, stuff like that. So over time, technology comes in, changes happens, and what have you. We were kicked out of the invention revolution, I would say, because we were very creative and we were inventing things.
Right, we were kicked out of the ownership.
That's right, the ownership of our invention.
Right.
So now, we don't have any control of a lot of things that we invented, that was taken from us. And so many other things have been invented that it's kind of hard to start a business because you have all this competition.
And the market is saturated. And even if you do create something that's unique and original, to cut through the noise, to let people even know that the invention or the product or the service exists, is very challenging.
It's very challenging because there's so much competition. There's so much competition. So if we had an opportunity where we could have stayed in that process of inventing and scaling and from there, because you know, back then when there were no cars, there were no phones, there was a lot of things that just didn't exist. And a lot of stuff we did invent, but they didn't allow us to keep it. So now they're saying start a business. Okay, if I start a business, now you got competition, I got to figure out a market. There's a lot of people that are already doing it. How am I going to fall in here? So it's very challenging for black people. They expect us to be able to start a business and scale it, but the competition has been made so great because you kicked us out. Now you're saying, well, come on back in. We're going to throw some money at you and do this and that. It's tough.
It is tough.
It's very tough. So what we have to try to do, and it's very challenging, and I tell entrepreneurs, you got to find a niche. Because it's all about improving something or finding something that's missing. So when you talk about starting a business, you got to really do some deep research. Take a look at every aspect. Don't take a look at the normal things that we like to take a look at that we're passionate about. But you got to begin to look in some places. And as an entrepreneur, you got to also take a look at purchasing businesses, buying existing businesses that belong to others, that can be Black owned, franchises, all types of different things. So the biggest challenge, we know how to run businesses, we know how to provide products and services, but the problem we're having now is maybe to get a business and scale it up where we can live.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge. Money's available, marketing, everything, but we have to be able to get the business going.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest challenge, just as a Black person, how do I get it moving?
Yes.
You know, and that's what we're trying to do, break down those barriers and help find niches, work on policy that's going to be favorable toward businesses so they have, Black businesses, so they have a fair opportunity to compete. And I think we're going to see more and more situations where copyrights and technology and inventions that were taken away from Black people eventually, hopefully, it'll start coming back, because we've invented a lot of stuff that people have taken from it that we got to get back so that we can go from there.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
City of Portland's got a new form of governance on the way. Next year, we'll have a lot more city commissioners. Next year, we'll have a city manager. Next year, we'll have, you know, a strong mayor structure, not the person, but the actual position itself. Next year, some things shift as folks start to campaign and people start to, you know, kick the tires of the candidates who are out there for all of these opportunities. What kinds of questions should people be, what kinds of questions should people ask prospective elected officials who want to be at the city of Portland and who are running for office for the city of Portland that are directly in the pocket of what Black business owners need?
Good question. This is what I always tell people to do when you talk to elected officials. Don't speak to them about general issues. Tell them about your issue. You gotta put them in your shoes. Tell them, say, look, my mortgage is due. I don't have a job. I got 4 or 5 kids. How are you gonna help me with this? That's a tough question.
That is a tough question. I immediately started thinking about, like, what would somebody say to that?
We cannot let elected officials not know the pulse of our issues. What we have a tendency to do, we talk about these broader issues. But you have to tell elected official personally, this is my problem. What can you do to help me? Because they're your representatives.
They are.
Because if you don't hit them that way, then they will go down this path of just looking at big legislation that's designed to touch a large amount of people. But as your constituent, they are there to represent you, to vote, but they're also there to take care of you. So I would suggest a call of action to anyone, when you talk to these elected officials, give them a personal situation and say, what can you do to help me? Because now you're putting them in a position that they have to look at you, not so much as just a voter, that I want your vote, but you're gonna put on their mind. I met this young lady with children. She's about to get kicked out of her house. She can't find a job or this and that. You gotta get to their conscience. And I think what's happening in this country, a lot of elected officials are losing their conscience. I mean, how can you not be concerned about the people who are running from Central America countries who they can just walk out of the house and get killed? They're being extorted, all this mistreatment, but you don't want to give them an opportunity. I'm just saying, you're not being conscious of what they're dealing with. How in the world can you want to push an overall abortion ban without any consideration, whatever, but not consider the fact that some women may be against abortion, but if something happens to their body, and they've been told by a professional that if you go through with this, you could die, or the child's gonna die. There's no conscience in this country anymore when it comes to individual people's needs. And what we have to start doing is hitting people who want to run for office. Yeah, I know you're gonna be concerned about raising taxes, lowering taxes, this and that, I want to know what you can do about my problem, and here's my problem. So my call of action is to put the pressure on them to make them look at you as a valuable constituent. And the way you do that is you say, here is my problem. Don't speak in generalities. It works. I told people to do that when I've run many campaigns. And when you do that to elected officials the same way you were startled, they're going to be startled because they're expecting you to talk about the homeless. They're going to expect you to talk about transportation. No. I got a busted pipe main. It's been like that for 6 months and nobody's come to fix it. What are you going to do if I give you my vote? And they're going to look at you like, you don't want to talk?
Who's in charge of the pipes? What is that? What division is that? I understand.
And then what you do, if they don't respond, you can call them. Say, remember you were running for office? Write them a letter, send them an email. I was talking to you, I told you about my pipes.
Still broken.
I voted for you, they're still broken. So what we have to do is make elected officials look at us as people and constituents, not just as a vote to get me elected. So we gotta be on their mind. We gotta be very conscious on their mind. That's what has to happen.
I love that.
It's got to.
Well, gang, I wanna, what a great conversation we've had with Lance.
I've enjoyed it.
All right. So Lance, Executive Director of the Black Business Association of Oregon, came and spent some time with us today, imparting all kinds of great wisdom and knowledge. And I want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
I want people to go to your website, learn more about the services that you offer, learn more about the dashboard that you have that is powerful. The dashboard is incredible. I mean, just the precedent alone and all the clicks and the links associated with it let me know that you were doing something that was incredibly special with it to learn about what is happening in the Black community and the Black business community in particular, wealth creation, generation, etc. In addition, you've got a database of Black businesses that if people are a member, tell us, how do you get access to the Black Business Association of Oregon's database of businesses?
Well, it's an in-house base.
Okay.
And we want it to be one of the most coveted databases, but you have to be a very special partner with us to get that information.
Okay.
But the purpose of the database is to find all the Black-owned businesses around the state, get them into the system so we can reach out to them once we know who they are and where they are, so we can find out where you are. How can we help your business grow and expand? If you're having any problems, how can we solve this problem? The same way we go and get a checkup every year from our doctor, we want to be proactive, and we're going to check on every Black business in our database at least once a year. If they're doing fine, that's great. If they have problems, we want to solve the problems. If they're ready to go to the next level, we want to take them there. Our goal is to create an ecosystem where the Black businesses know who we are, how to get in touch with us, and we know how to get in touch with them. And we want to connect other Black businesses around the state with one another. If you look at a spider web, they have different strong points and connection points. And that's what we want to do. We want to create a web, a strong web of connections of Black businesses across the state with these strong points so they can do business together and stay strong and lift each other up. And then we need help from every ethnic group that exists. It's time for everyone to acknowledge that what happened to Black people and Black businesses in this country is atrocious. And I know that some ethnic groups have been able to achieve better than us, Mexican, Asian, what have you. But this country is not going to reach its full potential until it does right by us. That's just the bottom line. And the best way to do right by us is to make sure that we are in a position to take advantage of the American dream like everybody else. Come together, help us fix our problems, which are not our fault. See, sometimes we get to be too hard on ourselves as though we did something. No, we didn't do anything. We didn't ask to come here. We didn't ask to be discriminated against. We didn't ask to be treated with bigotry. We didn't ask for any of that. We didn't ask for it. But what you did ask of us, we delivered. We go to wars, we take care of children, we teach, we work, we build. but it seems like it's always for somebody else. We want to do it for ourselves. But in order to get in that position, we need everyone to help us get in that position, and the benefit is everyone is going to benefit. The economies will be better. A lot of things will be better if people invest time and energy and money into this movement. We want to be able to help ourselves. We can help ourselves. Remove the barriers, make investments, and we'll return back. We want to be philanthropic. We want to be contributive.
Right.
We want to do more. We really do.
As a fact.
And we're just saying, help us get in the position so that we can. And if people with that mindset, they'll see it. It'll be a different situation.
And we'll all thrive.
We'll all thrive.
That's the final word. All right, thanks for joining us for this issue of Word on the Street Election Edition. To learn more about the Black Business Association of Oregon, please click the link below. Thanks for joining us today, and make sure to join the chat. You got some questions, some thoughts, some comments? We want to hear from you. Have a good day.